With a flaming jump, he arrived in front of Daly Simone. The lady was already on the brink of losing control. She said in a daze, "I don't want to become a monster." "All right." Klein looked at her with a sorrowful gaze as he quickly thought of the means to rescue a rampager. He had considered getting her to chant the fool's honorific name before pulling her spirit body above the gray fog, but with her body already mutating, it was apparently useless. The only way was for Daly to choose to remain there forever. As for the flower of blood, it was also unable to resolve such problems. Daly smiled with great difficulty as she resisted the white feathers and pitch-black scales that kept growing out of her. "So it's you. Didn't you ask me why I didn't take the initiative to confess to Dunn, to throw him in bed?" She gasped for air and said with a bitter smile, "I had indulged myself too much in the past." He was a conservative man. I felt inferior. She couldn't hold out much longer, with the outcome of her becoming a monster happening at any moment. At this moment, she heard Klein Moretti reply, "Captain actually liked you too, very much. Because you were too outstanding and young, he felt inferior as well." Daly smiled as her blurry gaze saw a man in a black trench coat with a receding hairline. He had dark gray eyes. She watched as he pressed his hand to his chest, bent down, and reached out his palm to invite her to a dance. She reached out her hand as her thoughts turned sluggish. The gray-eyed man in a black trench coat pulled up Daly, whose mutation was slowly fading away. Under Leonard's watch, they danced a brisk dance in the destroyed square, with the fountain spewing water everywhere. One material after another flew out. There were golden grapevines and a rather ugly rubber mask. Under the guidance of spirituality, they slowly mixed together and entered a small metal bottle. Amidst the beautiful dance, Daly leaned forward gently, resting herself in Dunn's embrace. Klein held the potion bottle, brought it to his mouth, and downed it. Suddenly, Klein felt that his soul body was connected to his physical body. They were split into countless parts, and without being able to hold it in any longer, he let out a cry from deep within his soul. No. His thoughts were diced apart, turning into fragments as they fused with different pieces of flesh as he gained his own sentience. These included Klein with pain, Klein with arrogance, Klein with coldness, Klein with gentleness, Klein who could amusement himself, as well as Joe Mingrui, Sherlock Moriarty, Gehrman Sparrow, and Dwayne Dantes. His entire spirit body seemed to be thrown into a grinding machine. Not far away, Leonard, whose cheeks were streaming with unconscious tears, first saw Captain Dunn, who was embracing Daly Simone, transform back into Klein Moretti. Following that, he noticed his face, neck, and the back of his hands. Pale-colored tendrils protruded out as though they had a life of their own. They kept growing outwards, turning into a transparent maggot. And beneath his clothes, there were also signs of squirming. This made Leonard have the feeling that Klein would collapse into a cluster of transparent maggots the next second as they raced in different directions. Just as he wanted to do something, he felt dizzy. He instinctively closed his eyes and didn't dare to keep watching. The transparent maggots that grew out of Klein's body shimmered under the sunlight, producing three-dimensional layers of mysterious symbols. They connected to higher and lower levels, directly presenting the abstract concepts of bizarreness, madness, change, strength, and wisdom. Amidst howling cold winds, black illusory threads rose up around Klein as they bonded together, forming strange tentacles. The tentacles flailed as his soul body, astral projection, body of heart and mind, and ether body were reduced to fragments as they fused with the different maggots that represented Klein's various thoughts, turmoil, and dilemmas. As they wafted between them gently, they seemed to fly up to an infinite height where there were countless illusions hugging huge, distorted buildings. They were either playing wind instruments, giving speeches, growling, or raving. Amidst Klein's countless chaotic senses, everything around him stacked together as though they turned into the spirit world. However, there were living people coming and going with the stars shining upon them. At this moment, the fragments filled with thoughts had similar memories, appear fresh memories. It was of King of Angels, Adam praying with his eyes closed. It was the scene of his shocking appearance. It was him using Death Knell against Ince Zhang Will as he pulled the trigger to blast open his head. It was when he revealed his clown smile, saying in a deep voice, "This shot is for Captain." It was when Spectator Adam used an extremely clear and innocent eye to take in the ending of the performance. It was of him turning into Dunn Smith, inviting Daly Simone to dance the closing dance. They were all so fresh on his mind, especially the gaze of a spectator. There was a seemingly corporeal feedback that felt like a magnetic force. It made Klein gradually discover his sense of self-awareness once again. Who am I? This was a question that Klein had an answer to when he was still a faceless. He didn't need to think too much about it as he quickly understood his identity. A person from Earth, a person who had been reconstructed from Klein's memory fragments, a person whose experience as a Nighthawk deeply influenced him, a person who played safe and was afraid of danger, but was able to persist and give up everything, a guardian and a miserable wretch. Strange sensory organs that didn't come from the body of heart and mind or soul body were extracted bit by bit from the fragments, condensing Klein's new thoughts, coldness, calmness, spectating, and overlooking. They were thoughts that allowed him to view the world from even more angles and dimensions. He knew that this could possibly be godhood. Without putting up any resistance, he chained the original spirit body fragments with black threads, allowing him to slowly take form again. At this moment, he realized the purpose of the advancement ritual. It was a mark, an anchor. Compared to other pathways, the Bizarro Sorcerer, who experienced the fragmentation of their soul bodies, required an anchor much earlier. However, this didn't require the support of any faith. On the contrary, faith was a numerous and jumbled affair with too many personal feelings involved. During the fragmentation during this ritual, it easily wiped away the humanity of the advancer who was only sequence 5, leaving behind godhood. A grand and profound performance under the watch of countless spectators was enough to make up this anchor. Although the spectators were few in number, as the pinnacle existence of the spectator pathway, Adam could match thousands of ordinary spectators. He could even imagine a theater of spectators to create the effect. With his entire body taking form, all kinds of knowledge surged out from the depths of his demigod spirit body, embroiling Klein's mind and giving him an indescribable impact. It felt as though his brain was about to explode. However, with some level of godhood and his rich experience, he could view this in a detached manner and rather easily pass through this stage. The transparent maggots on his face, hands, neck, and beneath his clothes returned into his body, turning back into the black-haired, brown-eyed Klein Moretti. Looking at Daly Simone, who was still in his embrace and slowly turning cold, he lifted her up and walked to Leonard Mitchell. He bent down and placed her on the ground. Daly no longer had pitch-black scales or white feathers. She had been restored to normal, and her eyes were closed. The corners of her mouth were curled up like she was having the deepest and sweetest dream. Klein stood up and looked at Leonard, who had opened his eyes again, and said heavily, "She has returned to the goddess's kingdom, just like Captain." He had turned her into a marionette to reverse Daly's mutation, allowing her to die like a human before releasing his control over her. Leonard tried to force a smile as he whimpered a sound of acknowledgement. Tears were streaming down his face. Klein gently nodded his head. To her, this might not be the worst outcome. She returned as a human to the embrace of a deity she believes in, and that's where Captain and the others are. As he spoke, He subconsciously and sincerely raised his right hand and tapped his chest 4 times in a clockwise fashion. Leonard instinctively drew the sign of the crimson moon. He was momentarily taken aback as his expression turned odd. Klein surveyed the area and said, "Take Ma'am Daly back with you to East Balaam. Make it known that she died due to Ince Zangwill's attack and had made exceptional contributions in causing Ince Zangwill's death. Don't worry, no one will investigate you. Of course, you can take this opportunity to leave the red gloves. I'm used to the church," Leonard said heavily. Klein took off his hat and bade farewell with a bow. Holding his hat, he turned to walk to Ince Zangwill's body and took a car that had a chariot and a red priest on it. The red priest wore the face of Roselle Gustav. Leonard's lips quivered as he suddenly asked, "Aren't you returning to the church?" Klein didn't turn around as he wore his silk top hat and headed for another exit of the square. After a few steps, he paused and replied to Leonard with his back facing him, "I can't return anymore." "Can't return anymore." Leonard stared in a daze as the familiar figure gradually distanced himself and vanished.